Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
When we think about where we left the people, and we think about Tisa, we think about this whole business of Moses being on the mountain, the people being down the mountain, we get a bunch of God talking to Moshe saying, do this, do this, do this, do that. Aaron and his sons will be the priests and blah, blah, blah. And then you bring them forward and then you get an offering and then you're going to sprinkle their clothes and on and on and on and on and tabernacle stuff and tabernacle stuff and tabernacle stuff. What I tend to forget is that whole time, the people are still down there and they don't see any of what we see. They don't see or hear or know anything of what we know and hear and see. The people, when last we left them, Leon Cass reminds us, when last we saw them before Tisa and before Truma, right, before the Parshiot, before Tisa, what we saw, and I forget this because there's all those intervening Parshiot about the Mishkan and all the instructions for the tabernacle, I forget that the people have been a part of Revelation. They have entered into a covenant, and Moshe has ratified the covenant by sprinkling them with blood. That's how he ratifies the covenant. You have a blood-strewn people, in Cass's words. I love that. A blood-strewn people standing there after Sinai, after their experience of revelation. They've entered into this covenant. They have the blood of the covenant on them. Then what? Right? Like, I don't usually think about it that way, right? We usually jump to the next scene, but think about it. Cass is right. They're standing there with the blood of the covenant on them. And Moses goes away. No one tells them how long Moses is going to be gone. We don't know that anyone knows how long Moses is going to be gone. So who are they left with? They're left with Aaron and Hur. We're told Aharon and Hur were the leaders of the people. Okay. Interesting that in Tisa we never see Hur or hear from him. And the people don't go to him. So that's fascinating. So here's this people totally shaken by their experience of revelation. They've entered into a covenant with this God who brought 1.5 years of plagues, destroyed the Egyptian army, comes in thunder and whatever onto this mountain, speaks to them, flips them out, right? And they say, Moses, you go deal with those. We can't deal with those. And that's where they're left. It's kind of a recipe for disaster. Why doesn't anybody tell them where Moses is, what's happening, when he's supposed to come back? It's kind of a recipe. It's kind of an invitation to exactly what happens. So Leon Cass doesn't want to say it's a setup, but it's kind of a setup for what happens. So that left me wondering, like, what was God thinking? What was our character God thinking? You throw blood on these people after you've revealed yourself in some way to them, and then you leave them standing there with Aaron. And now it's 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, so we're going to pick up there. That's where we're going to pick up Tisa. I want us to have that in mind when we come to Tisa, okay? So this is before Tisa. We're still in instructions about the Mishkan. Remember, we had Tetzaveh, Truma, all this stuff about the Mishkan, all the instructions to build the Mishkan. And that's where we are when we start Tisa, right? When you take a census of the Israelites, God is still talking. 2 Parshiot later, God is still talking to Moshe on the mountain. All this stuff. Blah, blah, blah. You shall make a laver of copper, blah, blah, blah. Let Aaron and his sons, this is what they're going to do with it. I'm going to come to the tent of meeting. Don't worry, Pam, I'm going to slow down. Next, you're going to take spices. You're going to make spices. You're going to have a weight of this, and you're going to have that, and you're going to have anointing oil, and the altar, and the table, and blah, blah. Right? God is still talking. Okay. Then, finally, we get the end of chapter 30, chapter 31, Parshat Ki Tisa. God says, I've singled out Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. And he's going to be our guide who's going to make all of this. And Aholiav, son of Achisamach, is also going to help because he's also really talented, blah, blah. And then we go on. God is still talking. Talking. Keep Shabbat. Chapter 32. Now we get the split screen. We've been up with Moses and God for Tetzaveh, Truma, all these two parshiot, like 12 chapters of Torah. God is talking on the mountain, and that's what we've heard and seen. What we're getting now is, meanwhile, back at the ranch, chapter 32. Meanwhile, so split screen, Moshe's on top of the mountain 40 days and 40 nights hearing all this stuff. God is talking. Meanwhile, the people have been down at the foot of the mountain in the camp for over a month. They don't hear anything from anybody. What I never thought of until I looked at Cass's lecture on this parsha is, when did they start asking for a God? We assume it's now, but Cass has a great point. How do we know it didn't start a week after Moses went up the mountain? And it's only now that they are yikaheling, they are assembling against Aaron. I never read it that way before. That is a fascinating read. So let's read the beginning of 32. Vayar ha'am, and the people saw, the nation saw, that Moshe was gone a really long time, right? Laredet min ha'ar, he's not coming down from the mountain. Vayikahel ha'am al Aharon. They gather against Aaron. They assemble, think no kings, right? They all come out 600,000 strong, and they're coming for Aaron. Now, what I always assume it reached a boiling point, right? And that's this moment. But I love Cass's reading that this might have been going on for a while. And they have finally had it, right? That they've been pushing him. And finally, they're not kidding around. They are coming for him. And what do they say? Come make us a God who shall go before us, for we do not know what has happened. To whom? Well, actually, let's look at the Hebrew. Boom. Get up, Aaron. Boom. Get up. Aselanu Elohim. Make us God that will go before us. Ki ze Moshe, because this Moses, Ha'ish asher ha'elanu me'eretz Mitzrayim, the man who took us up from the land of Egypt, lo yadanu mehayalo. We have no idea. Lo yadanu. We don't know. Mehayalo. What's with him? Literally. Ma, what? Hayalo. It is him. Is with him. What's his situation? We don't know. So we don't know what's happened with this Moses guy that took us up from Egypt. Okay. What does Aaron say? Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me. What has he been saying till now? We don't know. Have they come to him every day? We don't know. What we know is that they are now a mob coming for him, and he understands that he has to do something. So he tells them to take out the gold from their ears and to bring it to him. And they did that. This he took from them and cast in a mold and made it into an egel masecha. An egel, a calf that was covered, right? That was, what do you call it when you beat gold into thin sheets and then you put it over something. What's that called?
Plated.
Plated? Okay, thank you. Gold plated calf.
Gold leaf.
Gold leaf that they put on like something like wood, right? So that's what this is. It's a golden covering for the image of the calf. Vayomru, and they said, Eila Elohecha Yisrael, this is your God, Israel, Asher he'elucha me'eretz Mitzrayim, that brought you up from the land of Egypt. And Aharon saw all of this going on, right? Vayiven mizbeach lefanav. He built an altar in front of it. Vayikra Aharon, and Aharon announces in his big leader voice, Chag Ladonai Machar. There will be a festival to Yud He Vav He tomorrow. Now, you know how I usually translate this. You know how I usually interpret this, which is Aaron is saying whatever's happening is about Yud He Vav He. This is not apostasy. They are not worshiping a different God. They're worshiping Yud He Vav He. You've heard me say this many times if you haven't listened to the podcast from years before. Usually what I say is it's not apostasy. That's not the problem because they're worshiping Yud He Vav He. The problem is they want a representation of Yud He Vav He that they're familiar with. They want a representation the way they want it, not the way God wants to show up, but the way they expect it, which is an image, an animal image like they saw in Egypt. That's the problem. But what if that's not what's happening here? Which I didn't think about, again, until I read Cass. What if Aaron is allowing them to worship the calf God, and tomorrow will be a chag for Yud He Vav He? That is a different understanding of what's happening, and that is a problem. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see the difference between those interpretations? He's got the calf now, and he builds an altar in front of it now, today, and then says tomorrow there will be a festival to Yud He Vav He. Well, then what's today? I never read it that way before. So that's fascinating that possibly Aaron has allowed the people to worship at the foot of the calf. I don't want us to forget the year that I taught this story from the perspective of Israel as the main character in Exodus, if you'll recall, the biography of ancient Israel. Remember when I taught from that text? That if we take Israel as the character here, longing for a visible connection to the divine, there isn't a calf god in Egypt. There's a bull and there's the cow. And so if you'll recall in that book, when we studied the autobiography of ancient Israel, that author suggests the fact that there's a baby cow already begs the question of where's the mother? Where's mom? So that author is suggesting that in building the calf, they are wanting the mother God to take care of them. They are the calf. Israel is the baby cow. In other words, the image isn't of the God. The image is them. And it evokes the missing cow, the mom. That's what they're longing for, is to feel taken care of. Moshe's gone. He left them. And they haven't heard from God. God is busy yapping to Moses, but they haven't heard from God recently. So they're all by themselves. They are the calf. And what that evokes is the sense of they want connection to the parent to protect them. Okay. However we read it, they are not abandoning Yud He Vav He, or at least Aaron is telling them, we're not abandoning Yud He Vav He worship. Tomorrow we're going to do a big chag to Yud He Vav He. So early the next day, so now this is the chag for Yud He Vav He, the festival for Yud He Vav He. The people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and drink, and then they rose to do what? What are they doing over here? Litzachek. What's litzachek?
Could be sexual of some sort.
Could be sexual of some sort. And what would lead us to believe that?
The litzacheking before that we had.
Who was mitzacheking before?
The two boys.
So Esav and Yaakov, there was mitzacheking going on. We don't know exactly what it means there. And how does the king know that Isaac and Rebekah are not brother and sister? Because he catches them mitzacheking on the roof. So in that instance, it's pretty clear to us that with Isaac and Rebekah, that the king goes, they are not brother and sister because they are mitzacheking with each other. It is pretty clear that it is sexual, right? Like otherwise, why would it mean something about them not being siblings? Okay. So
why is it not translated?
It's a very interesting question, Mehmet. I think it's just one of those places where people have their interpretation of it, and that's how they translate it. Rather than, like actually translating the Hebrew, the people rose up, vayakumu, they rose up litzachek, to play, to horse around, to dilly-dally with it, like to dally with each other. Like what, right? We don't know exactly how to translate it, but it doesn't mean dance. I can tell you that. Right? There's a word for dancing. This is not it.
Lirkod.
Lirkod is to dance. This is not that. So they're doing something, and probably something licentious. If you think bacchanalian, that's how I imagine, right, what's happening here. All right, Bert?
Well, the translation does make a big difference in terms of when it says they've acted basely, as to whether the basely refers to the golden calf or whether it refers to the sexual activities.
No. We're talking about this word in the translation before you on my screen.
Right. I'm talking about the next line. God says to Moses, go down because his people have acted basely.
No, I know. What we're saying, though, is litzachek does not mean to dance.
No, I understand. So It makes a big difference. If it's just to dance, then it would seem that the acting basely was totally the calf.
Yeah.
Whereas if they are acting sexually, immorally, he might be referring to that.
Right.
So it's not.
It's not clear. Right. We don't know. But God says to Moshe, Lech, go, raid, get down. Right? Shichet amcha. Your people have screwed up. The one, in case you're curious about which one I'm talking about, the one you brought up from the land of Egypt, God says to Moshe. Leon Cass points out, Moshe has never identified this people as his. He has never said, my people, we, us, never. Moshe is further from the people. He's above the people. Aaron is of the people. And both are problematic. Both leadership styles are problematic. If you over-identify with Moshe's power and authority, and that's what keeps the people in line, then what happens when Moses is gone? Well, this is what happens, right? This is what happens. If you're too close to the people, like Aaron is, and identifies with them, then they run you over, and they're coming for you. And all you can do is try to flatter them and appease them and throw them a bone. That's all you can do as a leader if you're too close to the people and don't have enough authority. That both Moshe and Aaron in this reading fail. And this is what happens, right? It's a catastrophe. It is absolutely a disaster what happens. Now, how come God didn't know better? That is a question we're kind of left with. Okay.
But is that really up to God to know better?
Well, I certainly can't imagine that God doesn't understand that for 40 days they're getting pretty riled up. Does God not know that? Like it's an interesting question, right? That God just hangs out with Moses, and meanwhile all this is going on and it reaches this boiling point, and it's not until they're sacrificing and eating and drinking and dancing licentiously in front of the calf that God says to Moshe, you may want to go back down there. Really?
Man, I'm sorry, but I know you had spoken about, that we were going to address different leadership styles, but clearly even however many thousands years later, we can't figure out a leadership style that best works for the people.
Yeah. Well, and in that sense, I think that's why this is a story that continues to resonate, because humans don't change that much. We haven't changed that much since we wrote this story, and we're telling the story around the fire. And Cass points out the people are yearning and longing. They are blood strewn with the blood of the covenant. And they are longing and yearning for a connection with the divine.
And Amy, God's leadership power is really awful in this section.
Really awful, right? Really pretty terrible, right? And then God is angry and wants to destroy them.
But God says that they haven't followed the rules, but the rules haven't come down in the 10 Commandments yet.
Exactly.
So are the people supposed to be prescient?
Exactly. So we have all over the place a problem here with leadership.
Could God
and we have a problem with people who are yearning and have a bloodlust. They have all this in them and they have nowhere to put it. God is giving Moshe a bunch of instructions about where they're supposed to put it. Where are they supposed to put it, y'all? Where are they supposed to channel all that?
The tabernacle.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Susan. But God is busy telling Moses they need to channel all of that into sacrifices and blood on the altar, and Aaron spewing blood everywhere. And I get it. They need that. And then they'll eat the meat, and then they're going to have a lunch with me, and it's going to be awesome. And they're going to feed their whole clan, and it's going to be terrific. Meanwhile, they hear none of this.
Could God be testing Aaron's leadership abilities and also testing the faith of the people during God's absence this whole time?
So if it's a test, it kind of sucks because they fail. Mm-hmm. Aaron fails and the people fail, and then the people get killed for it. So that kind of sucks, right? Like I don't love God any better, our character God any better, if that's the case.
But right? Isn't that the case now? I mean, is God created pardon my lens, but God created us, and it's up to us to kind of figure it out. And we continue to not listen.
Well, certainly, I think that's the point of the story, for sure. For sure. Because the people who wrote this story are the people who are dancing in front of the calf, by the way. Right? I mean, that's who's telling the story. That's who wrote the story, are people who want a calf. And they know they're not supposed to. And they still want it. Right? Mm-hmm. All right. Rachel?
Maybe it's not so much a test for the people as it is a test for Moses. Moses doesn't get to go into the promised land. And maybe this is just like one of the things along the way. I mean, we know why it is that he ultimately doesn't get to go in, but maybe that's more the straw that breaks the camel's back rather than the only reason.
Say more.
So, I mean, his response, it's Moses who does this. He's the one who breaks the stone. He breaks the tablets, not God.
Right.
And we think of God as being, having this temper, and God does, but it's Moses who loses his temper. And so maybe the test is really for Moses. And so this is a test that Moses fails. And then Moses fails, another test later on, and then another test. And so ultimately, it's not that it's just that he hits the rock at the end and instead of speaking to the rock. And that's why he doesn't get to go into the promised land. But maybe this is like the first thing.
That's so interesting that you bring it up that way. That's so interesting. The tradition has God saying to Moshe, Yasher koach sheshibarta. Yasher koach on breaking the tablets.
Wow.
So it's so interesting because the Midrash wants to say God gets how angry Moshe is and why, and that Moshe broke the tablets not out of a temper tantrum. Moshe said, this was the contract. Y'all already broke it. So he breaks it to say, you've torn up the agreement that I just finished negotiating. Right. So God says, bring up a second set. We'll do this again once all these people are murdered for apostasy. But so I'm not saying you're reading it incorrectly. I'm just saying it's fascinating that the tradition doesn't have a problem with Moshe breaking the tablets.
Well,
but
I'm going to
write.
I'll write a midrash and go back and argue with them.
I
can argue with them even though they're not in the room, because that's what you do in a midrash. Right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I'll just argue with them.
But what I do like is that in both cases, it has to do with stone and Moshe's temper. Something about rock and Moshe's temper, right? Whether it's the carved stone or the rock he hits, instead of talking to it, in both cases, it's Moshe being angry with the people and then taking it out on stone of some kind. All right. Vayomer. Who? Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So God says to Moshe, Ra'iti et ha'am hazeh. I have seen this people. Vehine, and lo, behold, am kshe oref hu. A hard-necked people it is. Ve'ata, and now, ata with an ayin, and now, leave me alone, that my nostrils may flare, and I will consume them, and I will make of you a goy gadol, a big people. Okay. Leave me alone, that I can get angry, consume them, and make of you a great nation. Vayichal Moshe et Pnei Adonai. So now Moshe is playing the role of leader in the way that he is a good leader and that he is appeasing Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and says, why? Right? Why would you let your anger, or literally your nostrils flare against this people that you took out of the land of Egypt with great might and a strong hand? Why would you do that? And by the way, I didn't take them up. You took them up. Right? Like God says, your people that you brought up from the land of Egypt, and Moshe slips in there. Who brought them out? Let's be clear. You brought them out of the land of Egypt. Do you want the Egyptians to say that Ra'ah, it was evil, Hotzi'am, that you took them out, Leharogotam, to kill them in the mountains and to consume them from on the face of the earth? Turn away from your anger and don't do this thing, this terrible thing to your people. Zechor le'Avraham le'Yitzchak u'le'Yisrael avdecha. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, that you swore to them that you were going to, right, multiply them. Meaning it has to be their descendants. That's what you said. That's what you swore. So a second argument. The first is, what will the Egyptians say? And what will everybody else say? That you're an evil God who took them out of Egypt just to kill them in the desert, in the mountains. If that argument doesn't work, Moshe quickly, before God can respond, throws in another one. Remember that you promised Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. You promised them to make their descendants as numerous as the stars of the heaven. Vayinachem Adonai al hara'ah asher diber la'asot la'amo. Very interesting. Amo. So, and God, Yinachem, God was comforted, right? Like God is appeased, al hara'ah, about the evil, asher diber, that he said, la'asot, that he would do, le'amo, to his people. How does the omniscient author refer to the people now at the end of this scene? God is saying to Moses, your people, who you brought up from the land of Egypt. Moshe says to God, your people, who you brought up from the land of Egypt. The omniscient author ends that scene saying, what's the last word of that whole incident with God? Amo.
His people.
His people. Interesting. I never really noticed that before.
Translation is different. Translation says of the people.
I know. But look at that vav at the end. Amo. His people.
No,
his
I
nation.
know.
Yeah, I know. It's like I read over it all the time. But it's been this back and forth between whose people is this? And the omniscient author is the one who says, whose people is this? It's God's people. Okay. But they're not out of the woods yet, right? So Moshe, Yared min Hahar, goes down from the mountain with the two luchot that are written on by God on one side and the other. We don't know what that means. The haluchot ma'aseh Elohim. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing is God's writing. Harut al haluchot, engraved on the tablets. And now Moshe's coming down to where Yehoshua is, where Joshua is. Vayishma Yehoshua et kol ha'am. And Joshua hears the voice of the people. And he says to Moshe, Kol milchama b'machaneh. The sound of war is in the camp. Vayomer. And Moshe says, Ein kol anot gevura. It is not the voice of triumph, meaning they've won a battle, and it's not the voice of defeat. It's the sound of, that's not the sound I hear. And he comes, and what does he see? He sees them dancing, right? And he sees the calf, and Machol is dancing. So they are at this point dancing. And he becomes furious. Now, his nostrils flare. What was he just doing? He was just up the mountain saying to God, don't flare your nostrils against this people. And what does Moshe do right here? Same exact idiomatic expression. Vayichar af Moshe. And Moshe's nostrils flare. And he sends forth his hands. He sends from his hands the luchot, the tablets, vayishaber otam, and shatters them. Tachat hahar, at the foot of the mountain. They are thrown from his hands, and they shatter at the foot of the mountain.
Can't hear me. Good silence.
And he takes the calf, and he burns it, and makes it into a powder, and makes the people drink it. Then he turns on who? He turns on Aaron and says, Ma asalecha ha'am hazeh. What did this people do to you that you brought upon them such a huge sin?
Hmm.
And Aaron says, please don't let your nostrils flare against me. The same thing Moshe just begged of God. Aaron is begging of Moshe. But what's his defense? Yadata eta'am. You know this people. Ki virahu. Like the kind of bad, the kind of evil that they can get up to. You know them. Why are you mad at me? They said to me, make us a god to go before us. Because that guy, Moshe, that brought us up from Eretz Mitzrayim, we don't know what's happened to him. So I said to them, whoever has gold, take it off and give it to me. And I threw it in the fire and out came this calf. Right? Out came this calf. Moshe doesn't even bother. Right? Moshe doesn't even bother. Moshe sees that the people have lost their minds, that Aaron let them get to this place, right? And so he says, whoever is for Yud He Vav He, come here. Immediately, all of the Levites go to Moshe, and then it doesn't go so well with 3,000 of them being destroyed, 3,000 that were involved in the great unpleasantness of the calf. All right. Did you want to say something? Yes.
Excuse me, I've got a mouthful of cookie. But, there are any number of different interpretations that have been advanced. But I think that all of them, in one way or another, try to deal with the surface. And I think in some ways, what's necessary is to treat this as though there were a palimpsest beneath the surface. And the palimpsest really involves the shared, and I think the fact that it's shared is very important, the shared anxiety of this group of people looking for some kind of a savior because of the regression that the anxiety induces. They are looking for some sort of an external object. They're not looking to themselves. And I think that there is a kind of distributed way in which various elements of the psychological process that's involved, dealing with the Savior, finding ways to try to reduce anxiety, the dancing or sexual activity, whatever that phrase actually means, as a way of trying to reduce anxiety. But ultimately, really needing to find someone who is a savior. I think a lot of the issues describing Moses' relationship with Aaron, Moses' relationship with God, the relationship of all three of those characters to the people can be read as various ways of trying to find an external object, a savior, that will reduce anxiety, and at the same time that it provides a savior, provide a boundary so that projection of various intolerable kinds of things, the fear that they feel, for example, the privation and all that gives rise to, can be projected to the other side of the boundary. And I think that there's a palimpsest there to be found, and these various ways of looking at it, I think, are all they all to me make sense as ways that this might indicate this search for a way of reducing the shared anxiety so that the society as a whole can progress out of the regressed state that they were in.
And that will look like the Mishkan.
Yeah.
So that's what they have to get to. They have to abandon using their gold to satisfy their anxiety in building what they think they need. They have to use their gold instead to build the Mishkan, and the proper way of needing God's presence and then garnering God's presence.
The rituals.
Right, because that's the whole reason God gives for the Mishkan. V'shachanti betocham, that I might dwell among them. Mm-hmm. What God seems to understand, but doesn't communicate very well in our parsha, God seems to understand that law is not enough. Giving the people law is not enough. God has to give them a concrete, material way to channel all of that bloodlust, all of that stuff, all their anxiety, it has to be channeled. And that's what the Mishkan and the sacrifices and the priesthood is about. It's about giving them an appropriate way to express what we see here, inappropriately engaged. What I find interesting this year in reading this is, like, it seems to me God's a little late, right? Like, it just seems very odd to me that, yeah, okay, that makes sense. They have this anxiety. They need an object, blah, 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 blah. That's why you're going to give them sacrifice, and it's why you're going to give them incense, and it's why you're going to have them smell the smoke. Yes. You left them for 40 days and 40 nights without telling them that? Like, hang on. Me and your buddy Moses are going to be up here, and we're going to come up with a system that's going to give you everything you need. That is not what happens. They just take off. God and Moshe just take off for 40 days. Moshe doesn't have a picnic basket with him. What are they supposed to think happened? He has no food. He has no water. What do they think has happened to him? What would you think?
I've been abandoned.
I've been abandoned. Exactly. Alex?
I think it's like, well, sometimes you're not going to know, and you have to sustain yourself on faith and the unknown and the uncertainty. Like, what we're always going to be certain.
So Alex today, this week, seems to think that we folks are supposed to be better than this.
I didn't say that. I alluded to that, but for this particular part, what do you think? It's always the leader's going to give us all the answers? That you can just be indolent and rely on your leadership all the time to sustain you and give you answers? And I think what's interesting to me is, from what you have said before, maybe I have a complete misinterpretation, but why is God this character? Or why that it's up to God necessarily all the time? This godding or whatever it is. And I feel like we're now, God has become the opposite of what we talked about. That it's like that God gets to make all the decisions, and God is a character.
Huh?
Sorry. A lot of what we've talked about, am I right? Like, have I been here? But a lot of what we've talked about in the past is that there's this concept of God as a character versus godding, right? The actions and whatever. So I feel like we're reading this of if God is a character.
Well, that's the story, right? If we're going to look at the myth has God being a character.
Right.
If we want to go deeper and, okay, how would we unpack this myth? Then we can talk about godding. That whenever we get uncertain about whether or not there is such a business going on in the universe called godding, when we get uncertain and anxious about that, we panic.
And we can't, and we know that we can't always have the answers right away. So sometimes you got to wait around 40 days or even longer.
Yeah.
But
and
not when you've been dropped in the desert, pulled from your home, left everything you know behind and dropped in the desert.
Okay. Do you hear that,
What
Alex?
if someone dropped
Yes,
you from
well,
a
look what-
helicopter in the middle of the desert? Would you be fine for 40 days?
No one's saying you're going to be fine. You have to figure out how to live with the uncertainty, just like humans are doing every moment in time.
Susan?
Whether they're in the desert or not, or they've been dislocated because they're home in the Palisades, or however you want to look at it.
I'd move in with friends.
There it
the
is.
golden calf is friends.
There it is, people. There it is. And that ultimately is why they panic, because their house burned down and the pathology report came back, cancer. That's why they panic, because that's how it is. That's how it is. And that's when we panic. And that's when we start to question, could there actually be Godding going on here? Because if so, how come my house burned down? I want a calf. Because what? Because then my house won't have burned down.
I want a crystal. I want a Buddha. I want a rock.
What's crazy about it is like, sure, so make a calf, but it doesn't fix the fact that your house burned down.
You gotta jump in.
It doesn't fix the fact that you're in the middle of the desert with no idea where you're going, no idea where your leader is, no idea what all this business is about, no idea if you're going to be okay. How are we going to eat?
It gives us a metaphorical anchor. Like I hold a crystal
100%.
or a rock or whatever in the interim
100%.
of the uncertainty, the calf.
100%. That's what I believe really is going on here, right? Right? No leaks, no cucumbers, right, Susan? No, the fish was free. The fish was free in Egypt. Remember when they say that?
Yeah.
We ate fish for free. All we had to do was live in slavery. But the fish was free that we got for lunch. Rachel.
Alex, that was so right on. And it made me think also of politics and going really, back to even 2016. And sometimes I get really, really angry. I know everyone's going to think that I'm talking about, angry at like tendencies toward authoritarianism, which certainly is enough to make one angry. But actually, sometimes what I get really angry about is how people get so lazy and expect that if you just vote for the right person, that then you can sit back and be like, okay, everything's fine now, and go back to watching like, CNN or MSNBC and just like kick back on the couch and just be like, well, okay, I did my part and now it's okay. And that kind of, so that if like, as if the elected leader in the executive branch is somehow your savior and going to make everything okay. And that doesn't make everything okay. There's still just as much uncertainty and just as much of a likelihood that something bad could happen, or there's just as much of that everything, going on, day to day behind the scenes, yada, 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 that all the while, so that then you turn around and bam, a law's passed that suddenly, pulls the rug out from under you or someone you love. And I think it's applicable there too. And so sometimes a lot of the anger I feel, and I've been feeling a lot for, well, like I said, since 2016, and I'm only sort of starting to realize how angry I've been walking around, is about that actually. Not so much the authoritarianism, which I feel like we've always, people always lean toward, but the idea that people could just be so damn lazy about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. There.
No worries. No, that's what we're here for. Pam?
Earlier we're told that the people are being led by a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. And the people in this parsha are asking for a God to go before us. So the Torah doesn't tell us what has become of those pillars. Have they gone? We are told that when Moshe is on Sinai, the cloud covers Sinai. But what happened to the pillars?
Good question.
Yeah.
Any theories?
No, I was wanting your idea.
I got nothing.
Okay.
Right. So, but I think either way, whether they're not there anymore because it's up, the cloud is during the day, it's a cloud. At night, it's fire. So either the cloud is up there with Moshe, right? Because that symbolizes God's presence being on the mountain. Maybe the cloud has moved to Sinai. In either case, it's not enough. In either case, either they see it still but Moshe's gone, and so they don't trust it, or they don't see it and Moshe's gone and they don't trust it, right? Even if it's there, clearly it's not enough. They want something else.
Build us a God to go, make us a God to go before us. It seems to me like they're not seeing anything.
Maybe not. Maybe not. If not, I think it's another place God kind of misses the mark here, I gotta say. Bert?
On the other hand, the pshat of all of this is that the people did a really bad thing, and later, it's continually condemned later in Torah by God, and somehow Aaron, who seems to have been the enabler in all this, I just don't get how he ends up being the priest, leading the priesthood. So it's very, very strange, because we can do all of the analysis and, oh, poor babies, they didn't have this and they didn't have that, and that's why they were rebelling. And Aaron, really, he was just trying to postpone until Mary. I mean, there's all of these excuses we can make, but the golden calf was really bad. It was really bad, and God really didn't like this.
Right, and what we didn't read at the end of this scene, Moshe asks God to forgive the people, and God says, "Salachti kidvarecha," that we say on high holidays. I have forgiven according to your word, according to your request. Salachti. So it seems Aaron's included in that. I agree with you, though. It's kind of interesting, right, that Aaron becomes the high priest after a pretty bad screw up here, that he still is the high priest. It's a very interesting thing. And salachti kidvarecha must mean even Aaron was forgiven.
And maybe Aaron became the high priest because he listened to the people as well as God. But that's a different.
Okay. Now you've offered a different interpretation of what he's doing. Okay. Alex, then Betsy.
It didn't sound like there was a lot of great competition for, it wasn't like any other contenders came to the front, but I think that ultimately God forgives them because that's the whole premise of one of the big pillars or tenets of our faith is that we're going to continue to be lazy, so to speak, and use our cars and use our air conditioning. I mean, these are just, and our alcohol, whatever it is, because we are humans have their attributes and their flaws. And so ultimately there's going to be that forgiveness because we're going to continue to do this.
So tell me your point.
I'm just saying that it's baked into the human condition, and that we are going to be like this group of people, particularly in times where we are rudderless or don't have our calf, right? And are looking for something to anchor us. And we are going to continue to make mistakes and perhaps not listen. And it seems like one of the fundamental parts of our faith is that come Yom Kippur, God is willing to forgive, or ultimately we're willing to forgive ourselves, hopefully.
Okay. Betsy?
I think Moshe's ability to successfully convince God to not punish the people for this horrible thing that they did. I think he was the first in a long line of Jewish lawyers. I think That was the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Susan?
I just think it's funny that having two sons that Aaron is like, I didn't do it. I mean, it just hopped out of the fire. I mean, it just reminds you when you have kids, it's like, or you don't have Doggy did it. I didn't do it.
Yep. Right. Pretty typical.
But also, I guess we're humans. We are going to continue to make mistakes until probably the last, while on Earth, and it's part of being human. So it answers, like, even when we do make mistakes, hopefully not too big, with hope that we can be forgiven for that. Whether I sped in my car and hit a tree, whatever it is, it's like, or hurt someone's feelings. It's ultimately we are like children. And we're willing to forgive children because they're children. But being human often it's just making mistakes. And again, hopefully they're not too catastrophic.
Okay, Mehmet.
I'm puzzled between thoughts, but maybe I can summarize it quickly. Well, 40 days is a significant number in Middle Eastern numerology. 40 days is long enough to wait for something, or it is also a milestone or a certain time when you can do things after waiting for 40 days. So I think the people have waited for long enough for Moses to come down, and they lost their hope. And it doesn't surprise me at all that Aaron is chosen the high priest, because he played the mediator role. He told them on that day, the children, go play today, but tomorrow there will be a hag dedicated to God, to Hashem. So he played a perfect role of a mediator. So I'm not surprised that he's chosen high priest.
Okay. So for you, Aaron's doing what he needs to do to deal with this people, and he's trying to keep them in line with Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, right? And Yahwism, and and he's doing everything he can to keep them in line.
He's doing everything he can between old ways and new ways of keeping faith.
Okay. All right. So then he becomes ultimately, the one to do that in perpetuity. As always, a great study. Thank you, as always, for your time and attention. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.